All right, folks, today we're going to cut the shit. Let me say, as humans, we have choices in life, and we can choose to be empowered, we can choose to heal, or we can choose to be a victim and tell ourselves the woe is me story and really dwell on all of the shit that has happened to us in our lives. Or we can cut the shit and actually start to really truly live our lives the way I think God, universe, spirit has intended us to. And I think Becc agrees with that. My guest today is Becc Nelson. She has a lot of tools in her kit. She's a therapist. She's a best-selling author of the book Cut the Shit. She's a spiritual mentor. She is a psychic medium. She's a podcast host. She recently added hypnotherapist to her list of tools in her kit, and maybe there's more that I'm missing, but welcome back to the show.
Thank you. I always love that list of, I'm like, wow. When you feel like you're down on yourself, you should go on a podcast and have people read your accomplishments. Thank you.
I love it. I'm happy you're here today, and I'm happy that we're going to talk about this. And I have a whole list of questions here, but I would love for you to just talk about you for a second and your book and why. Actually, let's just start there. Why that name? Why so bold? Why just put it out there like that?
You know, I like your intro, right? When you're talking about let's cut the shit, because the energy of that is directed at yourself, right? And there's this assertive statement that you're making. And sometimes when I'm working with my clients, sometimes I have to say something that shakes them up a little bit, because they are stuck in that woe is me pattern, which is so easy to do. The hard part is that some people have a lot of shit and things that they have every right to be upset about or to feel like victimized about. But I should say and, right? Because my goal for this year is I'm going to change the but to and. Because the energy of that is so different. And yes, you've had a lot of things happen in your life, but the only thing you can control is your own thoughts and behaviors. And so if we do that, we sort of take our power back. Because if we decide, let's say, I always have a squishy with me, let's say that this is your power, and you say you need to change so that I can be better. I'm literally giving this power to somebody else. So when I challenge you to cut the shit, I'm literally saying take your power back.
Yeah. Yeah, because I've done it. I've done this, and I've also now, I think the more healing and work I do on myself, the more I see things in other people, and I'm working on really not being judgmental about it, because I'm like, ooh, yeah, okay, well, it still means I need to heal, right? But I also see why people become therapists and authors and podcast hosts and mentors and coaches, because once you start doing this work on yourself, there's almost this okay, yeah, I'm ready to now help other people. And we can share a bit of your backstory. There's a reason you do this work.
Yes. Well, yes. So I have had an alcoholic father, and a very violent alcoholic. There's sort of different types of alcoholics. He was a very violent alcoholic. I suspect he had from a number of things that I've seen and know about my own family, I suspect there was probably some sexual abuse there. It was never confirmed. And I was honestly terrified of him growing up. He passed away in the process of me writing this book. And interestingly enough, I had a hand analysis. Have you ever had that done where you have the lines in your hand analyzed? Mm-mm. It's fascinating. I recommend anybody do it. So they take imprints of your hands and each of your fingers, and then they find things that are certain types of lines that, you know how the joke is like, this is your love line and all that stuff, but there's literally love lines and lines that say what your gifts are and that sort of thing. And she had pegged me as somebody who had a Persephone headline, right? And that's one of the gifts, one of the things that you bring into this world, which I found fascinating. And Persephone, I'm going to butcher the story, but Persephone is a Greek goddess, the daughter of Zeus, who was pulled down by Hades into the underworld, and she could not escape. And what she did is she made the best of her situation. Instead of being miserable, she decided to kind of take that as an opportunity to grow and learn. And she found a way to embrace her life there because she really had no choice. So she made different decisions based on her circumstances. And she said, you have had an example of that in your own life, and you take that and you make roses out of it, and then you teach other people how to do that. And I'm like, I have never heard a more true statement in my life. I mean, it was such an empowering conversation because that is exactly what I do. And I also have something that she called it was like a bullshit detector or something like that. And I'm like, wow, that was so validating. That's exactly what happens.
Yeah. And it's so you're speaking and you're working and you're doing all of this work as a therapist, as a spiritual mentor. And so before I ask this question, I just want to connect the dots. So Becc is someone, just for you listening, if you've ever found yourself in like victim mode, she is somebody who had every reason to hold the excuse of, I had a hard life and childhood. Therefore, that's my reason for failure. That's my reason for this. That's my reason for that. But she did her work and she did her healing. And she is here now helping other people cut their own shit.
I'm not going to tell you that I didn't have my own years where it becomes when you continue to choose the same path and pattern, and then you're saying, why does this keep happening to me and things like that? Then the universe, this is what happens, right? You put out there into the universe, why does this keep happening to me? And they keep giving you more examples to illustrate why this keeps happening to you. So when it seems like there's more shit piled on, there is, because you asked the question.
And so yes, so I mean yes, you've done all of the you've had the experiences and you've done the things, and also it's why I think you can connect so well and so authentically with your clients because you've been there. I think that's like I think about that as like you work and you teach from both, yes, you go to school and you learn the things that you learn in school, but you also from lived experience.
So we call this working from knowledge and wisdom. So you're saying why cut the shit, right? Because I wanted that title so badly, and the publisher, or I didn't actually have a publisher, the woman who's my book coach was like, if you do that, then you risk that certain people are not going to read it because there's a swear in the title, and you're also going to risk that there are certain bookstores that are not going to put it on their shelves, which I have encountered both. My thought was, this is the energy of the people that I want to work with, so the right people are going to be drawn to it because of the title, not despite it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, and that's, I think, when we talk about, we talked a little bit about this in the show I was on of yours, is showing up authentically and in alignment with who we are. And then that's how we draw the right things in to our lives. So that makes perfect sense. And I'm excited that you stood your ground on that because I love the title. Like when I first heard of you before I ever met you, I was like, well, okay, this is a person I want to know because there's a little spice here.
And then people are like, oh, I need to read that. I'm like, you are my people.
Totally. And so where does your spiritual mentor versus your therapist show up in the book and also just in your work? Like how do you have to wear two different hats or do they blend together? How does that work?
I think it was around I talk about this story in my book about how I have an uncle in spirit, and I always admired people who were mediums and did energy work, but I had heard that when you show them that you're open to receiving messages, then they'll bombard you and all those sorts of things, which it can be true, but you have to put boundaries on them. So whenever I was getting messages from my uncle in spirit, even in counseling sessions, I would just block it. And I tell this story because if people are like, that sounds like a load of crap, I was like, that's exactly what I felt. And in the book, I tell a series of stories that show me that they got increasingly louder and wanted me to pass along their messages, these spirits. So I think it was COVID, really, when I had to get more quiet because our business had to shut down for several weeks until we needed to find a way to continue to do therapy because we do mental health and God, was there a need for it. And that's really when telehealth was born, was during COVID, because prior to that, we were not allowed to use telehealth as a means to provide mental health treatment by the insurance companies. We weren't allowed to bill for it. And now we are, as a result of COVID and all that. We had to find a delivery system. And I think that also allowed me to be able to finally open up to some of those gifts because a lot of things happen that's like too big for the scope of the show, I think, today. But it became very obvious that I needed to incorporate them. So I've always seen them as not two separate entities. They're things that I blended together. And the more I learned, the more I realized that I was sort of already doing a lot of those things. And as evidenced by, I would say things to my clients and they'd say, well, I never told you that. How did you know that? And then I'd be like, how did I know that? It just kind of pops in. You just know what you know. And you're like, I don't know, but I know that I know what I know.
Right.
And so I just knew that a lot of them were, even with the hypnotherapy, when I added in pieces of the hypnotherapy, I'm like, I already do that. And the theory is that you've done it in past lives and then you just need to recall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And so it seems like it gives you a full, like I said in the beginning, like a really full toolkit in order to help somebody. Because I imagine, let's say somebody comes to you for a session and then you have the ability to put on your therapist hat and help them through something. And then at the same time, you can get this very intuitive or a message from spirit so I think it's beautiful to be able to blend these things. What's your take on like people that are like, no, like therapy is therapy and coaching is coaching, or even like people that are like coaching shouldn't be because you need to have trauma informed, you need to have these things. So like, how do you feel about that argument?
That you can't blend the two?
Or just, yeah, or that like people that are like, so, just one or the other.
You know what? I just don't put labels on things. So I'm just not going to call it therapy, or I'm just not going to call it mentoring or coaching. I usually figure out the language that the person is using and use their own language, and that's where they're the most comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So if, like, for example, if people don't like, or they don't like, you can see that when you say you have ADHD traits and they're like, ugh, okay, we're not going to call it that. We're just going to call out, like, you have a hard time calming your brain down and your mouth moves faster than your brain moves faster than your mouth, blah, blah, blah. It's the same stuff, but I'm just using their language so that they can absorb it better.
Okay, so I'm going to take us on a bunny trail, but you just said something that I feel is really powerful, that I think as a society sometimes we get too stuck on labels from a good or a bad. And sometimes labels, you can receive a label and it feels very validating and you're like, oh, now I have something to call myself, right?
That makes sense, yes.
And also in other cases, I think we get too caught up on them. And then to your point, if we just need to get through, this is kind of like cutting the shit, actually. It's like get through all of that and just get to the point of the help, the support, the healing, the awareness that someone needs, regardless of the label.
So what I was also finding was spiritually that I could, just by talking to somebody, see the patterns that were playing out in their life. So what happens is the universe continues to give you opportunities to see your own patterns and see what needs to be broken or healed so that you can grow, ascend, move on.
What do you think? So here's what I'm sure you've seen this. There's a gap, and not always I don't know, it could be a small gap or a big gap of awareness and then the action and healing. So like, let's say, yeah, I'm aware of my pattern. I'm aware of it now. But now what? Like, how do you get from awareness to change, transformation?
There are several models that of the patterns of change and transformation of the process. If you look up the trans-theoretical model by James Prochaska, you'll see that there's 5 stages of change. But also, coincidentally, coincide with Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville song. Chapter 1, how did I get here? This isn't my fault. And then by the time you get to the end of the song, it's like, oh, this is completely my fault.
Yeah.
So things happen in stages. There's also, I use a poem called My Life in 5 Chapters that also demonstrate those 5 stages of change. And we can freely float through those 5 stages. And it's not just black or white. Either I'm doing this and I'm not aware of it, and at the end, I'm completely out of it and I don't go back into they call it the hole in the sidewalk. There's stages of that. Sometimes you start to have awareness. you know what you're doing, but you're still in the hole. You're still like, how the hell did I get here? I knew what I was doing and here I am. And it's because there's thoughts, behaviors, actions that lead to you being in this hole. And you might know some of them and you're getting used to it. And sometimes you do it and then you're like, oh crap, I did it again. Sometimes you do it while you're in the middle of it and you're like, how do I pull myself out of it? So it's not a black or white process.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe a myth that we could bust here because I've fallen into this trap as well, thinking that it's just a linear path. Like it's okay, I'm aware of the thing, great, not going to do the thing anymore. Boom, I'm changed. But there's backslide that can happen. There's a whoopsie daisy. There's a, and I'm talking about like as simple as like creating a like not a pattern of getting like completely offended every time somebody says something to me that's feedback related, right? I mean, patterns show up in everything, in relationships and then I tend to, or I have in the past, I'm not going to say that currently because I'm changing it. I used to then just be so hard on myself when I would be like, I thought I was past this. I thought I was done or whatever. And then you spiral back downward, right? So advice for those of us that have done that?
I hear that all the time. First of all, the biggest advice I have is grace. Grace for yourself that you're going to make mistakes. Grace for other people because they are going to make mistakes. That's a harder lesson to know that people can have good days and bad days. And know that some things are going to trigger you worse than others. I've definitely heard that phrase, I thought I was past this, multiple times. But instead of seeing that as a mistake or a whoopsie, I want you to see that as an opportunity to know where your vulnerabilities still are. So if you thought you were past receiving criticism from other people, but then one of them was like, oh, I don't know why this is sticking with me. Well, then look at what happened. Maybe it's a certain person. Maybe it was your mother. Maybe it was somebody older than you. What's the pattern that's revealing itself? They're all opportunities.
Oh man, you just made me realize there's patterns within patterns within patterns.
It pays the mortgage, But people, you can see, once you start seeing your own, you can also start to see them in other people. And you can see people playing those out. And you're like, and as a therapist, that's what I use to, like, I can see it clear as day. And can I help you to see it so that you can start to work on it?
So do you still have patterns you're working on yourself?
Hell yes, of course. I'm human. There are things that get to me and then you always shame yourself. You should be better at this by now. You help other people to, of course.
Yep. Yeah.
And
it's part of the thing, I think, and I alluded to this, that myth of you think you should just be done at some point and you're on the other side of it and then you don't have to do that kind of work anymore. And it's just unfortunately, once you open the box is open and you can't go back. And there's always going to be more things to uncover and more ways to grow and transform and become aware of. And it's always going to be that way. Yeah. What would you say to that? And, because you could look again, we could play the victim and be like, you mean I'm going to be broken and being fixed forever? Or how do you reframe that into opportunities and looking forward to the growth that we can have?
Or this is where the spirituality side comes out, because what I've learned is that why are we here is because we've chosen to have these opportunities, to have these experiences that help us ascend and grow. So anything that happens to you, even the bad things, even the really bad things, are opportunities to see where our needs for healing are and to be able to grow from them.
Any tips or, things just up your sleeve for people that are listening that sometimes I like to snap back and be like, easier said than done sometimes, right? Depending on the situation or the thing that happens. Any tools or things you think people could do in a moment or in a time in their lives when that thing feels hard or unmanageable or unbearable? And what would you say to do?
A couple of things. I think, first of all, there's something called, there's a book that I really like by Dr. David Burns called The New Mood Therapy. And he has a list in there of something called cognitive distortions. I believe there are about 13 of them. And they're all different ways that you can distort your thinking to stay in a lower vibration or to stay anxious, depressed, etc. I give them to my clients and have them laminate them so that they're around, they're on their refrigerator, what have you. Because, first of all, I want you to check in with your body. When something like that happens, stop, close your eyes, and then take a couple of deep breaths and say, where am I experiencing this sensation in my body? This is where we add the spirituality piece, because your emotions are meant to be energy in motion. That's what emotions are. If they're stuck somewhere in your body, first locate where those are. And then in that moment, you can start to allow them to continue to be in motion, because if they sit there in that lump, they're going to start to impact your physical health. Right? So in that moment, just locate it. And a lot of people, when people describe it in their sessions, they never without fail, they literally put their hand wherever that is. Like, whew. And I'm like, it's sitting in your chest. And then they're like, how do you know? I'm like, well, because you are sitting there with your hand on your chest. Or they'll be like, oh my God. They will literally put their hand wherever they're feeling that, wherever it's sitting. So find out for you, where is it sitting, and do some deep breathing and picture it blowing through, moving through. It's not meant to be stuck. Okay. And then if you have this list in front of you, say, now which one of these was I engaging in right that moment? So for an example, I'm not going to go through all of them, but one of them is the fortune telling error. Right. And that's, you know what? This has happened a million times. I know exactly what's going to happen. I'm going to try out for this play and I'm going to get rejected because I never get accepted for anything, blah, blah, blah. You're engaging in the fortune telling error. I already know what's going to happen because it just keeps on happening. And then I'm going to allow myself to, I'm not even going to let myself get excited about it.
Mm-hmm.
As an example. Then say, which of these are you doing right now?
That one, I love that one because I think it's my personal favorite. I do that a lot. And I talk about it like the stories we tell ourselves, right? And then I've caught myself in real time. This is where the awareness comes in, right? And it's still a pattern, of course, but it's awareness and you could pattern interrupt in the middle of it. So an example of what I did in that, I was just like this about something, just like what you said, and then this is going to because of this, and I stopped and I went, well, isn't that a funny story that I'm telling myself that has absolutely no basis in truth whatsoever? Then I was able to like literally shift my whole energy, my whole attitude, my whole being in that situation because I just kind of made a little fun of myself and interrupted that pattern.
Interrupting the pattern is the first thing. Well, I'm sure the first thing is figure out where it's sitting in your body and move it through. It's going to start to impact your, first it'll be pain, a headache, whatever, what have you, constipation, whatever it is, wherever it's sitting, move it through. It's not meant to sit there. But then identify, what am I doing right now? The problem is that for so many people, they are the one that, doesn't get picked or whatever. That's the pattern.
Mm.
And it's because they keep telling themselves, I bet you, blah, blah, blah. And sometimes you're right. So then this is actually another distortion. You focus on the times where you're right and you make it bigger, like it happens all the time. But what happens to those times that it's not right? Oh, that doesn't count.
Yeah. Yeah. We find we're looking for the negative proof of that belief, right? To just reinforce it.
That's another one of the distortions. It's called magnification and minimization.
Okay. This is so good. Say what the book is again, because people need to go. I want to go look at this myself.
It's by Dr. David Burns, and it's called The New Mood Therapy.
Okay. So the book combo for everyone out there with your book club is cut the shit.
Ooh, yes.
Right? And then followed by, what is it called again?
The New Mood Therapy.
The New Mood Therapy. Oh my God, I know I can't
by
remember
Dr.
that.
David Burns.
So there we go. 2 book club choices for anyone in book club that wants to do a little personal development and growth. We can have a little fun with it. Just write in if you want to have a book club with me, anyone. I'm not usually a book club person, but I would do it for this. That sounds fun.
Well, I also do have a companion workbook because there's exercises in the book where you can talk through some of these patterns with yourself, and it helps you to bring them out. And sometimes people are really stuck on holding on to these patterns. It serves them.
Yeah, I think there's I mean, a gazillion things out there about it, but the way I relate to it is change is hard, even if it's a good change. I was talking to somebody the other day and it was just over the silliest little thing, right? So he grew up with these like really good, I don't know, like super like special donuts from some, like not like a Safeway donut, like a really special thing. But then his brother, who's 5 years younger than him, they had moved. And so his brother grew up on Safeway donuts, right? So that's all he really knew. And so I know this is a silly example, but the personal development in me like comes out all the time now because he's telling this story about how it was like a special occasion and the parents went and they actually got these really special donuts. And of course, the older brother was like, yeah, like back to the great donuts. And the younger brother was like, I think I prefer Safeway donuts. And I was like, yeah, because change is hard, even if the change is for the better. And the donut is probably a perfect silly example of that. Like the donut was probably better, but you're used to this dumb Safeway donut.
Familiarity.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we do that to ourselves a lot because we're safe, we're here, and we resist really good, powerful change.
And we talked about that on the show when you came into my show. Why would people be afraid of change, right? It seems like a good thing. That's a whole nother
Yeah.
show.
Yeah. I mean, I'm that way myself. So what's on the other side of all of this? We do the work, we cut the shit. What does life look like on the other side?
Oof. It's higher vibration. And what I mean by that is there are things that would bother you in the past that you realize no longer touch you, no longer hit you the same way. And they no longer hit those parts of your body, right? Your heart, your chest, your stomach. And it's not like we talked about this, it's not like a light switch. It's not like all of a sudden, but slowly what'll happen is things will happen and you'll thinking about your day when you're going to sleep, etc. And you'll be like, you know what? That somebody said such and such to me, but in the past that really would have upset me. And I realize it doesn't have the effect on me that it didn't. And it's a freedom.
Yeah, I like that term freedom because I think when we think about the things we want in our life and whether that's in our health, in our relationships, in our money, in our everything, I think freedom is a core thing that pretty much all of us are after and however you define that. And so, anything we can do to get closer to that is yes, in my book.
It's the power. It's now, instead of me giving it to you, you have the power to upset me. I bring it back here. That's the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Any final parting words of wisdom for those that have been listening? Of course, tell people how they can get the book, how they can get in touch with you. And, that final thing, takeaway from this to go do.
Action step. I learned in grad school, I talk about this in my book, that when people come to us for help, it's usually because their best solutions actually become a part of their problem. So hear that again. So the first thing that we do as therapists is say, what is the issue and what have you done to try to resolve it? And usually people do things to try to resolve it and it actually makes them worse. The number one thing that I've seen people do, which is the basis of my book, is asking other people to do something differently so that you can be happy. This is such a trap because that's never going to happen. And so what you're telling yourself is, I can never be happy because you.
Mm-hmm.
And what I want you to do is take that power back and say, you can't change other people. Your power is, how do you change how you are impacted by it? That's the number one thing that always struck me. And that's the one thing the words of wisdom that I want to impart on you. And it's honestly the basis of my work.
It's beautiful.
My book is available on Amazon in a soft cover and a Kindle. And I also, within the past year, have done an ebook. Also highlighted by Matt Rife in one of his TikTok videos, which I think is amazing. That was when that came out. What a gift he gave me.
And your website, becknelson.com.
becknelson.com.
You can subscribe to Intuition Unleashed.
You can subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can subscribe to get updates every time we add an episode to Intuition Unleashed, my podcast. I have a YouTube channel where sometimes I just pop in and do other things. And there's some free resources on there, and I'm going to be adding the hypnotherapy piece. But I also do have a 15-minute consultation, which is free, if you just kind of want to bounce things off and say, is this really a good fit, and can you help?
Thank you so much for being here, everyone. I hope you gain something out of this, and I hope you feel motivated to take your power back after today.
Cut the shit.
Yeah, cut the shit. Hey, before you go, make sure you've subscribed to the podcast wherever you're getting it, and leave a comment and let me know that you were here. I really appreciate that. If this resonated with you, share it, because it will probably help someone else, and the more people we can reach, the better. So thanks again for being here, and I'll see you next time.